The broadcast is now starting.
Well, happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to the PixelMill Webinar Series and today's offering of Vegas Rules, a review of SharePoint Conference North America. As always, I'm Michael Wells. I'm the Partnerships and Community Manager here at PixelMill, and I'll be your host. And we have a whole slew of people here today to join us to talk about this week's big conference. Oh man, it was such a great week, and I'm very excited to share this with you all, as are the rest of our panelists. Just a couple quick things, usual stuff you're used to when it comes to these webinars. If you have any questions, shoot them on over into that questions tab. I will be keeping track throughout the session, and I will throw those in as they come along. If for some reason we can't get to them for any reason, we'll address those in the Q&A at the end, right? Okay, so there's that. If you are more socially inclined, feel free to use the hashtag PixelMillWebinars on Twitter. I'll be keeping track of that as well. You can throw your questions there as well. Either way, whatever suits your fancy. All right, without further ado, let's jump right into this session, all right? So today, again, we're reviewing SharePoint Conference North America. It was such a fun time. And let's introduce some of our panelists, right? Starting first with the president and co-founder of PixelMill. He's a Microsoft Regional Director and Microsoft MVP. He is Eric Overfield. Hey, buddy, good to see you.
Hey, how you guys doing? Glad to be here. What a week, huh? That was a lot. It's been a lot of fun. But it's good to be home and good now to recap and figure out what just happened.
Exactly. And then from our partners over at Kiefer Consulting, our dear friends, we've got returning to the webinar, Mr. Peter Allen, who is a Microsoft technical specialist, and Andy Coyle, Microsoft certified professional. Say hi, guys.
Hey, how's it going on?
So we were all there this week at the conference.
We're part of the slew.
Say that again, Andy?
We're part of the slew. You said there was a whole slew of people here.
You're the most important part of the slew. I don't know if you knew that. Oh, man. And our dear friend Ryan Stoughton says, it looks like Eric is looking over my shoulder. As you can see, there's an Eric.
Two of us.
We keep that up in the office to remind us that he's always with us. So real quick, before we jump in, I just want to give Kiefer and ourselves just a little bit to tell you what we're about. If you haven't joined us before, welcome. If you have joined us before, welcome back. But a little bit about PixelMill. So we specialize in building customized communication collaboration portals and sites utilizing Office 365, SharePoint, and Azure, with our main goal of really developing solutions that are in line with our clients' unique company cultures, or as we like to call it, SharePoint your way. Now, our team has found that like every successful solution includes a little bit of art, a little bit of code, and a whole lot of empathy. And then something cool about PixelMill is we've been around for about 2 decades now, right? So we've had the opportunity to work with organizations of all shapes and sizes and around the world, which has given us this really cool perspective of how to really work with you guys and really create that effective digital workspace. That's a little bit about PixelMill. There you go. There's my elevator pitch. Kiefer, Andy and Peter, that's your name. I know your name, Peter. Tell us a little bit about what Kiefer does.
Well, it depends on how big the elevator is, how big my spiel is going to be. But let's say I'm only going to the 10th floor. So Kiefer Consulting, we've been in business for 30 years, and we do consulting on SharePoint as one of our primary areas of expertise. We do SharePoint consulting end-to-end. We do .NET solutions. We do mobile apps. But SharePoint is where we're at most of the time, and difficult solutions, making difficult solutions simple is what we're focused on. Doors just opened, so.
All right, there you go. That was great. Yeah, thank you guys. All righty, so let's go ahead and jump right into the fun stuff, shall we? So here's a little overview of what we're going to be doing. There we go. Finally got over there. So we're going to talk about a couple things today. We're going to talk about the keynote and some of the major takeaways. There's a lot that came out of there. A lot of different speakers talking about a lot of different things. So much to talk about when we'll get there. And then what's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. We're going to kind of building on that, we're going to talk about a little more in depth about those big things, these big updates. What's happening for the future of SharePoint and Office 365? We'll touch all of that. Next, we'll go into session talk, or how we all stayed awake after partying until 2 a.m. And this is where we'll talk about some of the sessions that happened, both from a speaker's perspective for Eric and an attendee's perspective for Andy and Peter. We'll kind of talk about some of the stuff that happened there, how effective it was, what they attended, and all that. And then we'll talk just a little bit about the experience in the expo hall, kind of my perspective as an exhibitor, how it was to be around everybody, the attendees' perspectives coming in, and then we'll do a little Q&A at the end. Again, those of you who have been here before know we do a great Q&A at the end. We love questions. This group is great. They love questions as well, so we'll get to that. So let's just jump right into it. Let's start with the keynote. You three gentlemen were there. Tell me about it. Tell me what the atmosphere is like. Tell me about some of the big things that came out of that.
I'll start it off with a couple of the big pillars, which was AI, compliance and governance, extensibility, easy to share files. Those were the big pillars. Underneath the big pillars, they had various under AI. You could see how AI they're trying to automatically generate metadata now, so that the users don't need to generate metadata. One of the things that was cool with AI was the Microsoft Streams tool. It's a video stream tool, but it automatically closed captions your video, so that now with a video closed caption, it's searchable. So you can search for any text in the video and be able to find it. Before, SharePoint wasn't really a video tool. You wouldn't put video files on SharePoint. Now in streams, yeah, hey, I can search my stream and find where somebody mentioned something in a video. You also see that with their images, where there's also image recognition. So if I'm importing an image into SharePoint, it notices there's a boat in the image, and it can tag that and therefore be searchable.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Oh, yes, there's tons of other stuff.
There's a lot of stuff.
Whether you're talking about Teams, whether you're talking about Planner, and then we'll just throw it out there. I know you're ready, Eric. SharePoint Spaces. Talk about this. What is SharePoint Spaces? So definitely talk about that as well. We talked about, let's see, profiles in LinkedIn, right? We talked about that at Ignite too, mm-hmm. But they really are bringing that in. The other thing that I saw that I thought was really interesting is more and more information about who's viewing my files, what's happening with my files, more cards about that kind of information, and I thought that was really fascinating as well.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the AI on Delve and the connection between files and people and mm-hmm. files, and what we're working on.
Yeah. So when this is being recorded, for those of you listening to a later recording, this is 2 days after SPCNA 2018 ended. This morning, Christian Buckley hosted a tweet jam on Collab Talk, and the first question he asked was, what was the biggest announcement during the week? And it was hands down SharePoint Spaces was the biggest announcement. My first thought on that was, okay. But as the week wore on and I talked to more people, it starts to make sense what they're doing, and I really am happy to see Microsoft making these investments. And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk more about it here in just a little bit. In general, like if we just take the keynote, I like how they split it up. It was pretty good. We got a little bit of Cirque du Soleil in the beginning, which was kind of fun. It was streamed live through the the SharePoint Virtual Summit, the Virtual Summit, which was nice. So people around the world could actually join in on the keynote. And they split it into two major sections, I would say. It started with Seth Patton, who's the general manager of, I always get this wrong, it's SharePoint, OneDrive, and Office, where he went over to the vision of the general ecosystem. And then Jeff Teeper, the corporate vice president of the same group, SharePoint, OneDrive, and a whole bunch of stuff. Those guys do a lot. He then went in and then he broke down these different pillars that you two were talking about, which I liked. And with each pillar, they gave us some demos. And some of the demos I thought were really, really cool and was pretty impressive. My one little complaint was I thought they should have given a little more SharePoint 2019, but you only have so much time in the first hour and a half they had in the keynote. So it was good. It was really good. I was really happy with the keynote for sure.
Keynote was good. One negative, and I responded to NGM on this, but the stage wasn't high enough. The stage was low.
Oh.
As you're sitting in the audience, and the Cirque du Soleil was on, you could only see from the waist up, and everybody was holding their phone up, and so all you could see were people's phones.
Yeah, I did hear the room was packed. I was in the front, so I never turned around to look, but that was really good and encouraging. Overall numbers, the numbers I heard reported were in the 2,500 range, which I don't know if that's true, but it seemed to be somewhere in that range. So there were a lot of people, which was good. And I do hear the keynote room was packed, and I'm sure online it was lots and lots of people.
Definitely.
Awesome. Yeah. So it sounds like the keynote was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One of the things they demoed in the keynote was the ability for Windows Defender to protect against ransomware. So they showed ransomware coming in and locking everybody's files with encryption, or this one user's files with encryption. Defender comes in and says, hey, I've noticed ransomware on your machine. And it would say, okay, I've corrected the ransomware, and now I'm reloading everything back down from OneDrive back onto your machine, an older version that is now unlocked. So automatic protection from ransomware with your files that are on OneDrive. That was pretty interesting.
I could take that. We could spend an hour sort of just on this idea that, think about what you're just talking about. So in a sense, you're talking about this recovery option that through Windows Defender, through Microsoft 365 and OneDrive to be able to restore your files very quickly. That's not at all related to SharePoint. Well, it is. OneDrive is hosted it within SharePoint, but my takeaway is just how much other non-SharePoint topics were included in the conference because they are related. In fact, we are finding that Microsoft Teams and SharePoint are so closely related, and how Stream is able to give us some really rich video experiences, which of course goes right into our SharePoint experiences. OneDrive, these are no-brainers, of course, they're related to SharePoint. And it's like SharePoint conference because of the naming, but of course it's more like this collaboration and communication conference driven by Microsoft technologies. Yammer could have gotten more love as well, I think, but there were talks and discussions on Yammer integration as well.
I didn't see as much love for Yammer.
It's still an active component of this of the whole inner loop outer loop that Microsoft likes to talk about, and that's all communication, collaboration, and that's being driven by the back-end piece. I think is being driven by SharePoint, the way I see it.
So another thing that I don't think was like really highlighted, but you can see going throughout the things going on in SharePoint, is sort of real-time updating, right? So we talk about collaborating on a document, and they're getting more and more real-time updating going on there. But then the same with the library, right? Somebody else uploads something to the document library, all of a sudden it appears. You don't have to hit F5, you don't have to refresh, you don't have to do any of that stuff. So I started to see more of that happening across many aspects in SharePoint, where things are happening without you actually having to reload the page and go to it again to see the content or information.
Definitely, you see a lot of that. The browser, and this goes with Spaces, which we haven't really defined Spaces yet or told anybody what Spaces is, but you see this whole, the browser is now, even though it's thin, it's really getting to be a more full-fledged client where it acts more like a desktop app. Things are coming in without hitting F5. Updates are getting published out through WebSockets to everybody at the same time that's connected to that page. So you see a lot more nice technology. What we tell our clients all the time, I can't see my documents. First thing is, well, hit F5 and refresh the page. We're going to be saying a lot less of that in the future.
Yeah, so we're kind of jumping into the next section of ours, which is talking about all these big news things that are happening, right? So let's get to that. There we go. There's that slide. So let's start breaking down some of these bigger announcements even more. And a request from one of our lovely attendees, Mr. Greg Frick, is to talk specifically about the timelines of these things. So like, when is Spaces going to be a thing when we get there? What about, we'll talk about it a bit, SharePoint 2019, like when is that going to roll out? So let's start diving into some of these bigger things. And let's just go ahead and start with that big one, SharePoint Spaces. So go ahead, guys. Give us your thoughts on that.
Do you guys want to give an overview of your thoughts of it?
Well, let's define what is Spaces. So, yeah, anybody?
I'll start off. It's a,
as you can see, it's a fun topic for you.
Virtual reality space. That is, and the key part of that is that you construct it like you're constructing a PowerPoint, as easy as constructing a PowerPoint. So you drag products onto a canvas or into a role, and then you can scroll through the 3D product catalog or a 3D virtual reality Power BI display or a 3D virtual reality org chart were some of the things that they were demoing. I can't really put.
Well, it's, you know, it is virtual reality, but it's really more augmented reality, right? So they want to not make this so that you have to have a headset,
Yeah.
right? This
Very
could be done in the browser. And the thing that, applaud Microsoft, they have really embraced the open standards, right? No longer are we going down Microsoft's path, we're using open standards, which is great. And OpenGL is what they're using. So in your browser, you can interact with this, and it spins and comes closer to you and further. You can also put on, a headset and then engage that way as well. So they're really trying to have a broader audience so that, not everybody is going to have a headset in their office.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not augmented reality where it's an overlay on real reality. It's a virtual area. So it is virtual reality, but it's on the desktop in the browser. The performance I thought was great on it for a browser application. You could zoom in on a tent. They had like a pup tent graphic. You could point on it with a hand. I moved my hand here. They had a wand type of thing with a trigger, and you could point at the tent and bring it closer to you, and you could kind of look side to side around it and see inside the tent. Very, very high tech, high performant. We're told it's easy to construct on a canvas where you add a background and you add music to kind of have a immersive experience in the browser or in the VR headset, so that you're immersed in whatever it is you're trying to show, be it business intelligence data or an org chart or a catalog of products or whatever you can think of.
Yeah. This is a shout out to Greg Frick, good friend. I keep those comments coming. You're asking some outstanding questions. We'll get to your co-author one too. Timeline on Microsoft Spaces. I didn't really hear it. I expect we're going to see more at Ignite. I think this is a ways away. I think I'm really thinking mainstream years, but I hope to see a public preview this year, maybe in early next, but I really don't know. It's a ways away. One of the big takeaways for Spaces for me is that Microsoft is innovating, and they are not looking to be the, oh, me too, and we're just going to keep following what other people are doing. They're going to innovate and try new things. What I like about Spaces is it's bringing virtual reality to the browser, which is a good thing. This is like the first or one of the first. I've never heard of anyone else trying to do this. Creating a virtual reality space in a drag and drop browser-based format. So it's not necessarily, I don't look at that Spaces as saying, oh, hey, let's go ahead and make a document library, something that you can just like navigate around in 3D space. That to me doesn't make any sense. Rather, instead, we can create 3D spaces, VR spaces within SharePoint, within a canvas, and that canvas happens to be a browser in SharePoint that can now be consumed both in the two-dimensional browser, a computer, laptop's viewport, as well as using a VR headset. So you don't need a VR headset. So then my next big issue, because I just didn't get it, I'll be honest, I guess I'm too old for this VR thing. I needed someone to help me with some of the use cases. And then I thought, okay, well, if I get a use case, maybe I'll understand it. And this is the use case I heard, which makes sense. But this won't make sense for a small company probably, or it won't make sense for a lot of organizations, but some could. Some people like to consume data in a three-dimensional world, or a world where they can sort of navigate at their own leisure, but not through a hierarchical web page. Think like an onboarding process in a new large organization where it's not just about following the HR policies and procedures, but you want people to learn about the organization in general, the history, let's say. You've got videos, you've got some things they need to fill out. And instead of going to a web page and having to navigate this web page in a linear format, or it's got the navigation on the left and has your content in front of you, and you just sit there for 2 weeks going through this. Instead, what if you had a VR space where you could navigate through this content, like walking down a hall, and on the right's going to be the history, and you can go move over there and you can go read the history and watch videos on the history, but then you can go to the training videos, and that's in the training video room over on the left. This is a general, say, VR use case. But now with SharePoint Spaces, we have that opportunity, or there's this promise that we could actually build that space in a browser, not knowing really any language, that can quickly, easily communicate with SharePoint and Stream and other outside services. That makes sense to me. So it's not that Spaces is just to create a SharePoint document library that you can walk around. That doesn't make any sense. Rather, you can create a 3D immersive environment that can be consumed in a browser or in a headset that can provide a more rich experience for anybody who would be trying to consume that data. That makes sense to me. I think that's really cool. We'll see though, and we'll see how long it takes. But what they did demo, it was pretty impressive, pretty cool. I'm sure that was live code. I was told that was live code. That was not a video. That wasn't faked. But I have a feeling they showed us what was working really well. They're probably, if you said, hey, does that web part work? Maybe it didn't. But they're working on it.
I was in the, I went up and put the Spaces headset on, and it's kind of interesting, the trigger mechanism they give to you, and it just floats up right into your hand because the guy's handing it to you. You can't see it. So the trigger floats up into your hand, and everything they demoed was on that, in there. So everything worked, point, click, drag. There was still work to do, spinning it around and turning it in 360 degrees on 2 axes still needed to get done.
Yeah.
But it was an impressive piece of technology for running in SharePoint on the browser and constructed by drag and drop.
Yeah.
So along the point that you made, Erica, it's like when they first announced it, I didn't get it. I'm like, I'm not understanding the use cases right now.
Yep.
And then that day, I sat down for lunch and I started talking about it with somebody right next to me, and the person across from me said, "Oh, this is going to be awesome." And I said, "Why? What is it?" And he goes, "If you sell product, if you sell or manufacture anything, you have 3D models of stuff already. And for us to be able to do that interactive in Office 365, in SharePoint," he goes, "it's going to be great. I have a use case right now for it in my company." And the light bulb went on. I went,
"Yeah,
okay."
Yeah.
That
makes sense.
I had the same lunch with a different person, and I said, "What do you think about Spaces?" And she was in marketing, and for a big corporation, I'm not going to name the name, but she was in the internal communications, and they had use cases all over the place for it. You know, video, interactive tours of different sites, some construction and fabrication laboratories, so that they could take people through the construction or the labs without putting people into the labs where, you know, restricted areas and that sort of thing. So that the line worker or the worker could see what it is the product they're constructing and selling, and get a better attachment to the product they're selling and how it's created, and the people that create this product, internal. So big corporation, yes. Kiefer Consulting ourselves, I don't see any use for it. I'm not creative enough yet to see where it would fit into the space of the government, but I'm sure there's use cases in the government as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we can keep talking for the whole rest of the half hour. I think we should move on. I just kind of want to quickly hit the rest of Greg has some more questions around this, or some more thoughts. I think this is going to be a more lightweight tool for creating 3D experiences. The real rich ones will probably still have to go to where you'll be building true code. But to echo what Andy and Peter have been saying, that I think this is kind of a lightweight browser-based tool of dragging and dropping these components. You can create some pretty cool, rich 3D experiences, and organizations are already creating 3D models to be able to now surface them quickly and not having to spin up a whole environment. They'll just be native in SharePoint, where organizations are already putting their content. I think it's a cool no-brainer. But I think it's not going to be for the most rich, detailed experiences. Because in a drag and drop environment with web parts, you could probably only do so much. But I think it's going to be a great entry for a whole bunch of fun use cases. My little shout out there was in the tweet jam again this morning. John White at Tygraph was sitting next to the keynote, is what he said, to Erica Telly at Record Point, and he didn't get it, I think, like the rest of us, but Erica did get it. She was on our webinar, I think, last month. And like she then told John, no, this is what it is, and like the light bulb went off. I think just if we start to hear some use cases for the early adopters who really get it, it's going to make more sense, and there'll be a stronger buzz around it when it comes out. So good stuff. Hey, maybe that's a webinar when it comes out there, Michaels. We'll have to get Erica back on, and she can do a fun Spaces demo. I'm sure it's months away because we need some code, but yeah, cool. I say we move on from Spaces though, because we can keep going. There's so much more buzz. I know, Andy, you had a whole bunch of stuff on the dev track.
Yep.
I know we are going to talk about tracks in general, but there's some really cool buzz I still like to hit at.
Absolutely. So yeah, there's a million places we could start. Let's talk about OneDrive actually for a bit. There's a couple things that happen with OneDrive with the mobile app and some real-time collaboration things. Why don't you guys give us your thoughts on that?
Crickets. Wow.
Don't all jump out at once.
No, I'll jump in. So what I thought was cool, and this was a demo that I believe Adam Hermitson, I forgot the other person who was doing it with him. They showed some of the real-time collaboration within the documents themselves, so that if you're working with Word, you're working with other Office products, you can really do that co-authoring live, and you're seeing what people are editing, and that's all driven by OneDrive, which I think is really, really, really cool, powerful stuff. Totally unrelated. There's some new stuff coming out. This is from Microsoft Build, where through Visual Studio Code, you can actually do co-authoring of code. And I'm a dev, and I know that you guys are devs as well on the line, or some of you are. This co-authoring experiences that we're getting nowadays through our different products that we're using is really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, OneDrive file sharing, it's certainly a component of SharePoint that we always advise our customers on. I wasn't at too many of the OneDrive or any of the OneDrive stuff, but you can see where they're putting a lot of time and effort on OneDrive, the Defender syncing that I was talking about before, and I think they're going to be expanding that space a lot.
So, if we look at OneDrive, one of the things that they talked about was the mobile side of it, which is the scanning of documents or anything in. So they really were pushing that. On top of that, they talked about sort of the automatic upload of pictures, right? And so for business and for personal, that being integrated into it.
Uploading your camera roll, from your camera.
And let's see, they just talked about better management of the permission UI. I'm just trying to look through the list of things that we had here. We talked about the malware detection.
That one's cool. That out of OneDrive is going to be just awesome, I think, for a lot of organizations to set it up right.
Yeah, that's key. Greg, our good friend Greg Frick, had another question about OneDrive. So he says, are you saying that it's driven by OneDrive because it's driven by the OneDrive sync? That's in reference to co-authoring.
Well, yeah, it's the sync tool that's allowing it to happen, I thought, but you're kind of hitting some of my limit on OneDrive, the actual backend, how it's working. But in general, just the co-authoring experience, I think, is just super cool.
And the outside of the organization collaboration really is where that's shining, is because it's very easy to share your OneDrive outside of your organization. Collaboration, then both parties on both ends can collaborate, or multiple parties on all ends can collaborate on documents, and it's still on your OneDrive. So that's where you see a lot of the co-authoring collaboration is the external part.
One of the sessions I went to when they talked about OneDrive was really interesting. They said, when do you use OneDrive for collaboration? When do you use SharePoint for collaboration? And really, I thought it was pretty good. If you're going to collaborate with one or two people, maybe OneDrive, right? But if it's going to be a bigger group of people, really, then you need to probably get a SharePoint site, get that set up, and do that. The other thing that we haven't really hit upon is the files on demand, right? So if you're on Windows 10, no longer does your OneDrive have to download everything onto your system. You can really do a sort of files on demand, and they showed that, and it was really impressive. So that was another feature and functionality. It's not there in one of the sessions. People asked, can I get it on my Apple? Can I get it on iOS? And the answer is no. It's only on Windows 10 right now.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yes, a lot of fun things coming out about OneDrive. Thank you guys for touching on that. Kind of going back into the mobile app world, there was also some talk about some updates to the SharePoint mobile app. We talk about that a little bit.
So I think the UI change on the mobile apps is pretty big. They're putting search dead center in the mobile app. So if you look at it, you'll notice that down at the bottom, if you were to click, it's the search, and so they're really making search a real priority in doing that. Not quite on mobile, but the other thing that they did talk about was search and the added functionality and extensibility that they're adding on to search. So if we remember in 2013 and others, you could like have promoted search or results and so forth. And now they have this ability where you can create a list and create sort of promoted items in that list, and then when you do a search, those will come up where appropriate. So if we think about the Office 365 SharePoint search today, especially the modern, it wasn't as customizable as it was with 2013. It's getting to be a lot more.
Mm-hmm. You see a lot more on the search side. You see a lot more AI on the search going on. The zero search results, where as you click on search, it gives you results of what you think you may be looking for. So you definitely see a lot of work on search, and you're just going to see it rolled into Office 365 kind of transparently as you go along. You'll see new search items coming up.
I think it's good to see the mobile app continue to improve, but part of me is thinking it's more yesterday's technology, whereas I like to see all the modern experience improvements to be mobile ready out of the box. So we can build these rich experiences, and we can get a pretty unified experience in the browser or on a mobile device through just through the comm sites, the team sites, etc. Or looking at another route potentially is that I'm going off subject, but it's still related to this whole mobile app, is the Microsoft Teams and then the Microsoft Teams app, where if I'm going to consume SharePoint in the browser, I would consume the SharePoint site directly, but moving forward, and I can just tell bluntly, this is what PixelMill has done. If I'm consuming SharePoint data and I'm communicating, collaborating, I'm starting in Teams, and with the integration of more and more components of SharePoint, including SharePoint Framework web parts, including our lists and libraries, including Power Apps flow directly into tabs within Teams, I'm going to potentially be moving to Teams, to the mobile Teams site, or to the mobile Teams app, rather than the SharePoint app. And thoughts or feelings, or is just, we'll move on from that?
No, I got thoughts. I think everything you saw at the conference leads you to believe that Teams is the front end for all of the SharePoint scaffolding and structure. So
I won't disagree. I kind of got berated for that.
You got berated.
I'm going to disagree. So I hear that, but I also see all of this other stuff going on with the hubs, and other things that really make SharePoint relevant as it is, right? So now I'm going to say that, right, and I'm going to counter that, but then I had breakfast at a round table, and I was talking to this guy, and he goes, yeah, we use Teams. We haven't really rolled out SharePoint as all, but we use Teams, and it is their intranet. So literally they have a team for this department, a team for this department, and a team for this, and then channels underneath of it.
Yep.
It was fascinating he even brought out the mobile app and showed me what he had done. And so that was very interesting to see. I have never thought of Teams in that way. I always think of Teams as projects, collaboration, not as that's my department site.
And if I were to give advice right now to a client, to any client about Teams, is I would say Teams is your collaboration and transient data. If you're having structured or managing your document storage or content management, or you're putting applications out, then I think you're still firmly in the SharePoint world. In the SharePoint world, one of the things, what's the buzz that I didn't really hear anybody talking about, but I think it's huge, is the coming soon, which is the row formatter. So the row formatter allows you to format a list row. strictly SharePoint. Well, big deal, Andy. It's like they already took that away from me with my JavaScript. I was putting a row format on it with JavaScript. Well, this is going to allow you to format your rows on your list as a card. So now your lists can be cards rather than the typical SharePoint one row list item. Now you have a card of your expense report or whatever you're putting in a list. So I saw a demo on that, and it was really good, and it triggered a lot of thoughts about how SharePoint can be primed. That, along with Power Apps and Flow, you can build solutions real easy with just out-of-the-box tools, Power Apps, Flow, and the row formatter.
So getting
go ahead, Peter.
Well, just to say that, it's getting back to something I said earlier, where the consistency in the environment and how it's consumed and where you are is happening. And so it's great to see in Teams, the document library now that's going to be in Teams is the exact same document library experience and code from SharePoint, right? It's not what we have today, which, I hate, and I'd always click on go to the SharePoint site to get the real experience. That's now coming to, to the Teams site. So, getting the row formatter or the field formatter and then the look and feel the same. It's impressive.
And SharePoint is just as relevant, if not definitely more relevant than it was yesterday, even with Teams potentially taking over some of that front end. So still having hubs and comms and team sites and having the infrastructure hosted within SharePoint itself, just because then you service it in Teams does not take away the relevancy of SharePoint being the back end and the major components and your driving force of your portal. But yeah, I could see that portals, the traditional portal, in a couple of years may be a thing of the past. Now I'm sort of lambasted saying, no, that's not going to happen. And I know that the 50-some canned internets would never want me to say such a thing. But I look at it and say, more and more portals are going to move to Teams, but it's driven by SharePoint. Again, this is how PixelMill works now, is everything happens in Teams, but everything's driven on the back end by SharePoint and OneDrive. All of our data is there, all of our content's there. It's just that we're chatting, but when we have projects, when we have communications, when we have interactions with our clients, it's all happening within Teams. And also I want to preface, Teams has a ways to go. There are some definite issues, such as speed of the app, is one of the biggies that I know hits out, and the other one is I really need to be able to create those private channels within a team. So I can't have a team that everybody in that team has access to channels, but I believe that's high up on the list of what Microsoft, both of those issues Microsoft's well aware of, and they're doing what they can on them.
I was in a team session, and that came up many times about having a private channel, and it's high on their radar. But it was interesting. If you looked at, at the end of the slides and they talk about the roadmap and the things coming out, they say it's high on there, but at the same time, they don't show it in the roadmap. They don't show it as coming later this year or anything like that. But it got a lot of attention in the Teams meeting, session.
I think you're still, small companies, easy to move to Teams. Bigger companies, you're going to need to get your governance in alignment and really have your own.
I can see an hour webinar on Teams as well. I know we want to move on. I know that you've got stuff. I want to hit something though quickly though. I know that we're all devs here. On the devs thing, one of the big things like what's the buzz, and this was in the keynote, but I didn't feel got enough. And this to me is a game changer. The SharePoint PnP, the Patterns and Practices community came out with the PnP Starter Kit, which I know you guys, I think you went to some sessions on it. Andy or Peter, I'll let you describe it more, but this to me is like a holy grail of open source free code that will change the way we interact with and start developing SharePoint, or SharePoint Online in particular, from the dev side. Do you guys want to give a quick overview of what your thoughts are on the PnP Starter Kit?
I'll give some overview on a bunch of the thoughts that I had on the dev tracks. So with the modern experience, they're taking away the ability to run JavaScript, inject JavaScript, and they're giving you back this framework on the backside. And there's a lot of work that goes into making visually appealing things for users. And for the dev side, it's all gone back to command line programming. Everything's command line. So you have your, the Yeoman, Gulp, to a certain degree, Visual Studio Code is very text-based, whereas Visual Studio itself is a lot more graphically oriented. So you see a lot of shifting on the dev side because it's a lot more nimble. We can run commands. It's less time to develop for a community or for a person to develop a command than to develop all that overhead for the for making a graphical user interface for a developer. So, get comfortable with command line because we're going command line all the way now. PMP, excellent work they're doing to kind of consolidate SharePoint on-prem with SharePoint online so that you're using one method, one pattern. PMP stands for patterns and practices. You're using one pattern, and it can hit SharePoint 2013, SharePoint 2016, SharePoint 2019, or SharePoint Online, all with the same code, but it makes different calls under the sheets to get to all that. So that is where, you're going to be doing all your development there, whether you like it or not, and it's going to be good. There's going to be some learning curve for everybody from their traditional tools. If you haven't downloaded VS Code and you're not using VS Code, you need to get on that pronto. Or if you're on Visual Studio, you're fine. But you see, everybody is running at the conference. Everybody's running VS Code. Everybody's doing everything with Node and Gulp and what's that? All that whole tool chain. So everyone's doing everything with that tool chain, and that's the approved way to go. And it's open source, and it's up to date, and it's pretty well thought out.
So, Eric, to your point of the starter kit. So, I went to a session and with Vesa, and he talked about it, and it was very impressive. What they put together, right? It's a culmination of stuff that they've been working towards, right? I took a look. The site templates is very exciting. The site scripts are very exciting. The whole concept of how they're doing this, I think, is exciting too. Where it's like, all right, you deploy a site, but then you run this script afterwards to add all this stuff, whether it be lists or content types or site columns or things like that to it. And the idea is that then down the road, if you need to, you can apply another library or list or site content types or whatever to it easily. So that they're setting it up so that we're not stuck. It's not like we did a site definition and then that's it. You want to change it? All right, go create a new site and do something else. And then to have it all packaged together and to be able to deploy it as easily as they do it. I was very impressed by it.
The assembling elements together to create the site. So
yeah. My way of looking at it, the starter kit. So I don't have the URL readily handy. I'm sure we can find it, and in our recap we'll provide this. It was released on, I believe, Monday morning. I think it was Monday. I was fortunate to be sitting next to Vesa when he clicked Vesa Yuvan, and he's works on the engineering side over at Microsoft. And he hit the publish button. It's kind of cool to watch. Okay, so it's an open source, so freely available open source demo. Basically a demo intranet. So if you wanted to create a canned intranet or a demo intranet, you can go and download this thing. You could install it within your tenant within a few minutes. So that's the definite long-term goal for Microsoft. And you would have a demo intranet with some demo content. It's supposed to have about 10 or more web parts, 5 or more extensions. There's a really cool, some simple branding to it, using the new site designs and site scripts, using provisioning, the provisioning engine on the back end. It has this cool little footer. So it's a really nice little footer that minimizes. You open it and it would grow when you. Then there was an edit feature directly within that, so you could edit the footer in the browser as a site administrator, which is just really cool stuff. And it's just showing these patterns and practices in one kit. But you could download this one solution rather than being just a PNP example that you would have to figure out how to get it into your tenant. This is a solution, a cold can solution, and I see some good things with this. I see long term, this is really going to help us all build communication and collaboration portals on top of SharePoint so much easier, where we won't have to go to third-party vendors to do this. We'll be able to do 90, 95, 98% of the work on our own, or maybe with just a little bit extra development. And I just think that's so cool for SharePoint. It's been one of the biggest complaints with SharePoint is that you would always have to go to third-party vendors to do all this stuff, and you'd have to go and hire expensive consultants like Kiefer, like PixelMill, to do all this cool work. Yet these keep hiring us, but you can do a lot of this stuff yourself now, or you would be going to vendors, and I know that Kiefer, I'm sure you will all be using it. Same with PixelMill. We're going to be using this as our base code. We're going to be leveraging the community, which will help everybody, which will help all of our customers get out to market quicker, which I think is a good thing because it frees us up from some of the nitty-gritty and instead helps our clients build a far more usable and adopted solution, which is great. We can focus even more so on building the right solution or what that solution should be doing, because a lot of the components have already been built for you. Along those lines as well, I think a lot of the consultants, what our job is going to become is navigating all of the rapid change stuff that's coming out by Microsoft, rather than saying, oh, hey, we have this new version, okay, we're going to totally hack it up and build this solution for you. Now all these tools are out there, we all can share the same toolkit. It's now going to be much more important to figure out what's the right tool to use today, because I want to go to SharePoint Spaces. Well, they're not ready yet. So we can help keep our clients, we all can help as a community keep all the people we work with in line with what's available today and tailor what's available to you specifically. And I love that opportunity. I think it's great. I'm a dev, but I still love the fact that the base stuff is done for us, and we can all agree on this really cool code built by 5 of the top minds in SharePoint development, and we all can share that. Amazing.
Yeah.
Real
amazing.
quick point. One of my amazing PixelMill coworkers shot me the link for the PMP starter kit. I'm going to put it in the chat for everybody. I will also include it in our recap for you guys to find. So shout out to Carolyn. Thanks, Carolyn, for helping me out there. Thank you also to Greg Frick, who is also searching for it as well. Appreciate you guys. Continue on.
Cool. Thank you all.
So here's a little tidbit that I thought was really interesting. So we have these new, site templates that you can create, right? So now you can create the template that you want people to use when they create either a team site or a communication site, right? Well, one of the people in the audience asked, well, okay, so when I create a new Teams, how can I make it so that that site is different, or, the way that I want it to be? Because it does it by the default one, whatever one. Well, you can actually change the default to any site template that you have, right? And so I thought that was an interesting way to sort of address that, especially like you, PixelMill, that, in your team, Eric, that uses Teams all the time. Well, now you can set your template that your SharePoint gets created with to something that may have additional lists or a content type already baked into the document library and so forth, and then create the standard one that you call team site, standard or whatever as the other template, and then you can build off of that. So I thought this is great because we're transitioning to Teams and starting to use that. And some of the things that people have asked is, can we get certain columns and fields in place in the document libraries by default? And initially I said no, but now I know how we could get around that.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. So there's a lot of, again, there's still a lot more stuff we could talk about. We could probably talk about this for a long time, but let's kind of stick, I guess, somewhere in the dev world. There was also some updates to the SharePoint framework, right? Including SharePoint framework coming to Teams. So Eric, I know you're a big SharePoint framework person. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but how do you feel about that?
I am absolutely excited. I had the pleasure of offering 2 sessions on the SharePoint framework. They gave me the 101 one, which was fun on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday I got to do an advanced SharePoint framework development, which was good. It was outstanding. I thought the attendance was great. I had good feedback, so that's always wonderful. One little thing, like what could the conference do better next year? As I understand, SharePoint Conference 2019 is going to happen, is that they record the sessions, because it would sure be nice if that could also go onto YouTube, like Build and Ignite and all the rest of them. SharePoint Framework 1.5 has been announced. It's not released yet. The SharePoint Framework it's growing, it's getting better, it is outstandingly cool. I really like this fact that we can start building our SharePoint Framework components, our web parts, and then surfacing them over on Teams so that we can build these custom solutions. And as I like, my last little monologue was how I think that hopefully development won't be as much needed because there's out of the box. I'm going to flip on that and say yes, but SharePoint Framework allows us to build some really cool custom components that will still need some good solid developers to do that. But if we all get started with the same baseline that the PnP community has all kind of agreed upon, and the experts have said this is the right way to do it, we can then build some really cool, sophisticated solutions, but we don't have to worry so much about like editing the master page or all that nasty responsive stuff. Most of that's done for us, so we can focus more on solutions and proper guidance for our clients. The framework itself is maturing really well. It's really nice to see. It was a little rocky to start. There was just a lot of little gaps, but the Microsoft SharePoint engineering team sees it, and they're making some cool announcements. The other really cool thing I like, this was a big one for both of my sessions, was native graph access to SharePoint Framework. I know we're basically only talking about SharePoint Online here. There's been some on-prem questions, and we're sort of ignoring it because SharePoint Framework will work, but graph, not so much. The native graph access to SharePoint Framework is just going to open up all of Office 365 into our SharePoint Framework web parts, where we can get to anything. We have so much control. And then Azure Active Directory application access for authentication for our SharePoint Framework web parts is just, it is so cool. We basically can get full trust solutions back by securely offloading that kind of custom script, that kind of custom development, kind of custom code into Azure, where it's safe and secure, and then we can securely access that via SharePoint Framework using Azure Active Directory for authentication model. We're almost there. We're so close. This is all good. It's great stuff, but we're almost at the 100% feature parity of on-prem, yet almost like 110%. We've gotten all this new stuff. Not only do we get everything we had before, but we have all this great new stuff as well. My little monologue on the SharePoint Framework. If you haven't learned it, or if you're at half of a dev or more, you've got to move to the SharePoint Framework. I just stole, I think, Andy's line. He was chatting with me before all this. That I'll let you go off on that if you want to, Andy.
Get on board with SharePoint Framework. It's time. You don't really have a choice. So like it, learn to love it.
It would help if I didn't mute myself all the time. Great. So we're only got about 10 minutes left in this, and then we'll go into our Q&A. We can go over a little bit, but I want to hit just a couple more points while we're still talking about the big news. Maybe do a quick hits kind of version of these. Microsoft Training Services is coming out. Anybody have anything to say about that?
I didn't see anything on anything about the training services other than you could embed their training services into your SharePoint site. I really didn't see how they were doing that. So,
gotcha.
Eric, do you have something on that?
No, I saw that at the kind of like at the end of the keynote as well. There's some training stuff that was added, and this was sort of one of the interesting things that I saw throughout the whole conference. And I'm trying to navigate this. The thought that I saw, this overriding idea that I saw, was Microsoft is continuing to fill in a box, and I wish I knew what the box looked like. But this box currently is filled with a lot of ISVs, a lot of software vendors that have created training solutions and canned internet solutions and web part solutions that Microsoft is encroaching upon. And I sort of see this training one as that, but I get why Microsoft is doing it. They want to ensure that SharePoint, Office 365, SharePoint Online, out of the box, has all of the bases covered. So you don't have to go to a third-party vendor because you're already paying a lot for SharePoint. I mean, it's a good deal, I think, but you're still paying a lot. It should have a lot of this initial training. It should have a way that you can create an intranet, because SharePoint is often used for creating intranet. It should have these features readily available to get you started. Very much like the dreaded other word, the S word, the Salesforce world that we're not supposed to talk about in SharePoint. They sort of have these models where when you purchase their expensive software, you get a lot, but there's a whole ecosystem outside of it. And it's going to be interesting to see how ISVs navigate this new world, where I think a lot of the low-hanging fruit will be taken out by Microsoft, and they're going to have to adapt their business models to provide a new type of add-on service to enhance what Office 365 and SharePoint provides.
Wonderful. All right. So I think
jumping over to,
go ahead, Peter.
To quickly, we haven't talked about streams. You know, so there's a big shift going on from Microsoft Video or SharePoint Video, Microsoft Video to streams. And so I went to a session on that. I actually found it very fascinating and looked really exciting to have it sort of set up and sort of that whole migration. So that's something to look forward to if you were thinking about video or, you know, hosting it. I think they're really stepping up their game on the service and what they're offering. And as I think Andy said earlier, you know, translation, right? You know, closed caption, automatic. I mean, it's
so cool.
They showed, here's what was really cool. They showed searching your videos, and it would say, here at this time, this is where I found the word, and at this time I found the word, and this time I found the word, and you can click on that and jump to that part of the video. Amazing. They showed another thing is people. So who's in the video? They show a timeline of each of the person and then a little bubble of the video in the timeline of where they show up, and you can click on that and then see Sarah or Bob or Tom or whatever.
Yeah, wasn't that cool? I think that was Dan Holm that showed that in the keynote. Greg Frick asked, is any of the sessions are they all not available? Yeah, they're not, but I do believe the keynote through the virtual summit is available, so you can watch the keynote. I'm pretty sure. If not, we'll post that out in our blog post recap as well. And if we can't find the video, we'll get that link out for you.
I'll do some research on that.
So we could go another 3 hours, but I know we all have to go back to work. So
okay, so the last two things I want to talk about before we get to the Q&A, that I think are the big things, so you guys can you know, take it as you will. Two big things: the SharePoint migration tool upgrade, and then SharePoint 2019. Those are the last two things I want to talk about. I think those are the two big things. So let's start with the migration tool. Thoughts on that? Version 2, how's it looking?
I can quickly hit that. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Peter.
No, go ahead. Hit it.
My review of it is that it's, and I love ShareGate. It's ShareGate Lite. It's a free tool, which is nice, up to version 2 point something. It's good for providing simple migration of files, list, libraries, the simple stuff. It's for the simple migrations you'd be looking to do. If you need more sophisticated migrations, you're going to be going to the third-party vendors. You're going to be going to ShareGate, and they're going to provide you a much more rich, better experience, I think. And that's okay. It's, again, like Microsoft is getting a lot of the low-hanging fruit. They're helping make sure you can do the basic stuff really well out of the box. But if you need more sophisticated solutions, there's going to be third-party vendors to help you there.
Totally agree.
Great. And then
what was the other one you said?
SharePoint 2019 coming this summer.
Yeah.
I was at the Ask Microsoft Anything
I missed that
session, and during the Ask Microsoft Anything session, they said, we heard that there's not going to be any service packs or feature packs for 2019. Is that correct? And they said, yeah, this is the most robust battle tested implementation we've ever done, because it's straight out of SharePoint Online that's being used by jillions of people. So they're not planning on any service packs or feature packs for SharePoint 2019. They are planning on it to be pretty bulletproof. And so don't wait for a feature pack to install it. Don't put that in your plans. You know, that was the traditional SharePoint methodology.
I did not hear that.
Yeah,
that's interesting. And wow, that's interesting, because another thing that I thought was cool that I was told in the public setting, so I assume it's public, is SharePoint Online is upgraded, I think, like every week. And the upgrade time is a couple of seconds, because they've really nailed down the DB detach, DB attach. So basically, they're able to sort of spin up the new farm, and they just point SharePoint to the new database environment, and it's instantly quick. But they're updating it weekly. It sounds weird that they wouldn't look to add feature packs that they would say, hey, let's not wait 3 more years to create another on-prem version. They would say, hey, we found that this is really cool. Let's go ahead and put it in. But okay, cool. Yeah, I have to admit readily, I'm not an IT pro. It's not where I enjoy spending my time. I know a lot of people are excited about SharePoint on-prem. most of the questions I received while I was doing my sessions was, okay, this is great, but I'm on-prem and I'm never moving to the cloud. My first response is, are you sure? They laugh at me and say, yes, okay. It is nice to see more of the SharePoint framework move to 2019 and more of the general features of SharePoint Online. Again, my basic understanding, SharePoint 2019 is a snapshot of SharePoint Online from about January of 2018. So I think it will be bulletproof. Like, I think it will be good. I just didn't know they don't plan to do anything.
Well, I don't know if their
Greg.
cadence might speed up rather than every 3 years they might speed up their cadence, but there's nothing coming out. Install it now is what they're saying. They're trying to get you up onto it as quick as possible. And traditionally, people IT pros wait for Service Pack 1 because there's
yes.
that
I don't.
come out.
This is the new SharePoint. I don't think that's necessary.
Gotcha. There you go. Well, thank you guys for all that. We kind of talked about, so I'm going to move on now. I think we've talked all the major stuff. The next thing was going to be talking about the sessions, which you guys kind of did all throughout this. But any final thoughts on the sessions that you guys either attended, or Eric, you did a couple sessions. So any kind of thoughts on how the sessions were, which ones you liked the most? Spend a couple minutes on that.
Let me just quickly jump in. I didn't get to attend many sessions, so I'm going to leave it to the two of you because I know you did, and I already talked about my sessions. I thought the attendees were great. I thought they were really, really fabulous. But what do you guys think about the sessions?
I'm going to speed through a couple of things I was interested in, which was the apps and flow. A lot of our customers are in the government cloud, which it's not available yet in the government cloud, but it's coming soon, they keep saying. So Power Apps and Flow. Big thing in Flow in the last couple of weeks, they have a new flow action for a REST call. So with now with the REST call, you could do anything you want in SharePoint pretty much. Now that Flow has a REST call, so huge game changer for me on Flow. We saw a demo by Mark Anderson about Power Apps. Really nice UI manipulation. So if you're trying to do UI for your list or library, you're going to get still kind of the traditional look of the form, but you can certainly augment the form to do conditional visibility, conditional formatting, cascading dropdowns, maps and imagery, pre-populating columns, and multiple list editing. So all the things you would buy a secondary form tool or you would use InfoPath for traditionally, you can use this. It's still not going to get you the look and feel of your form because they're trying to keep it the general look and feel. But I thought Forms and Flow, where I would have recommended not ready for prime time, I'm now starting to be ready for prime time.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm just going to hit what I focused on and you know, the areas that I think of interest. So Power Apps, like Andy was saying, was definitely great. I didn't go to any flows, and I wish I had. The other was the Microsoft Graph, and I love how the integration is going on with the framework. Because one of the challenges with Microsoft Graph that I found is the whole authentication, right? We love our REST API calls or any API calls and basically in SharePoint because authentication happens in the background for us. But with the MS Graph, we have to, you know, have that extra layer. So I'm looking forward to that being integrated in the new framework.
Yep.
The other thing is themes and design. You know, I'm seeing more and more, you know, ability to begin to make it a little bit more unique to our clients and so forth. Site provisioning, I'm really excited about that. That's one of the things that I'm going to be jumping into. And back to the APIs, I went to this one called APIs Everywhere or something like that. And it was really well done. And the thing that was really cool is he showed REST APIs, he showed the Graph APIs, he showed custom APIs, he showed all these APIs. But here's the beauty of it. It was all in one web part. It was all in one framework, right? Microsoft framework. And he had a little switch that would just switch which API was calling the data, and then he had the same output, right? So different ways that we can get the data really well, and we can get that off of the GitHub. He has that up there. So those are some of my highlights.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, great. Thanks, guys. And then the last thing we'll get to before we go to our Q&A is the expo hall, which is probably more on me since I spent the majority of my time there. But you guys as the attendees and you, Eric, as a speaker as well, can give your thoughts. The expo hall was really fun. It's always fun to be in that environment and see people that you see at these conferences, but you only see these people like 2 or 3 times a year. We were next to a lot of really great people. We were across from our friends at SharePoint. We were next to Lightning Tools is just one down the way. We were across from our friends at Zach. Shout out to Ryan Scouten for playing Mario Kart with me at our booth. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. People are doing what they got to do, and I feel like there was it was very spread out. It was very nice. There's a lot to do for everybody, no matter what you were going in there for. You three, as people who didn't have to stand in a booth all day, how did you feel about that?
I enjoyed it myself. One of the reasons why I go to these conferences, and it's the primary one for me, is about networking. And I would recommend that for anyone going to a conference. Besides the learning, of course, is huge. It's my counter to the learning is most of the material is online. It's just hard to find, or you'll never find the time to spend a day learning it. So it'll take you a year to learn what you could go learn at a conference in a day. I get that. But the second thing, I think if you're not networking in a conference, I argue you're doing it wrong. There's just so many opportunities to go talk to people, go talk to vendors and find out what they're doing and chat about your issues. Even if you may not be able to purchase their services at the time, almost all the vendors are looking to talk and interact with you, and you'll start to get some ideas of what can be done out there. And then you can also have that opportunity to network with the speakers. Here's these experts you followed on Twitter, you follow their blogs, you can go see them speak, and almost all of them are very friendly, approachable people. So the expo hall, to me, really facilitated that pretty well. It offered the Monday night, the first night there was the reception, and then they had all of the breaks were in there as well. So I thought it was really good, and the makeup of the sponsors, the exhibitors, was really good. If you needed help solving your problems with the Office 365, SharePoint Online infrastructure, there were vendors there that were there to help you, that had add-on tools and products and services that you can then go and have those communications. And I don't always like just picking up the phone and calling an 800 number and hoping for the best. I'm doing that with solar power right now, and it's kind of a painful experience. But when you go to a conference, you can talk to these people. You can see there's a face behind that phone, and I think it's nice to start to build that relationship if you think you're going to start working with a vendor. And the expo hall, I thought, facilitated that very well.
I agree. There was a little bit of something for everybody. It was really nice to have that spread. All right, and with that said, we've now reached the Q&A portion of our session today. Thank you guys for all of that stuff we talked about today. So we're going to start off with a question from our friend Carolyn. It sounds like a lot of people are excited about updates to lists. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I know, Andy, you were talking about column formatters and stuff.
What? Could you repeat the question? I didn't hear you, Michael.
Oh, sure. I would love to. Let me pull it back up. Where did it go? It was about lists. A lot of people seem to be updated about some of the updates to lists. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
On lists.
Lists.
Lists and libraries.
So, the list experience is gonna get a lot better with the row formatter. You're gonna be able to do cards, making the list look better. One of my things that I remarked to Peter about when we were having drinks one night was in the keynote, the default SharePoint fonts don't display well on the big projection screens. You couldn't see the rows and the columns. You could see the borders and all the framework, but you couldn't see the individual rows very well. They didn't show up very well. I think with when they get the row formatter done, I think there's a lot of opportunity in there to make a list look exactly how you want a list to look like. It is not going to be a business user task because the row formatter is using a JSON, an OData, a camel-like syntax. So it's very programmer-like in a window. But that being said, you're going to be able to make the list look however you want the list to look like, much better than you can do it today in standard SharePoint. You got to write a lot of JavaScript to do that.
Now, I don't know if you guys, can't remember if it was in a keynote or if it was in another session, but importing from Excel.
Oh yeah, missed that one.
That was really cool. So importing from Excel, you could grab
drag and drop an Excel file.
You could grab all this stuff, drop it in. It would figure out the fields for you, so it didn't have to be in the right order. And then if one of the columns that you're dragging in is not a field in your list, it adds it. It was very slick.
I think that was a keynote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to the, oh, go ahead.
Automatic conversion of an Excel data in Excel file into a list, which people do that all the time. Want it all the time. They want to import Excel into a list. So,
I want to say that was a Dan Holm video, demo. It was cool.
Yep.
Back to the column formatting, very, very cool stuff. And then when you augment that with the SharePoint framework extensions, where you've got your command bar extensions and your item extensions, I just blanked on what it was called, where you can really, field extensions, field customizers, where you can customize the fields with column formatting, I think is going to give us a lot of control of our lists and libraries. But integration with Power Apps and Flow, there was some Power Apps stuff that was going to be added directly into forms that was just lists that was looking really, really cool. On the column formatting side, here's my other shout out. So the PnP community to the rescue. The column formatter that Microsoft provides requires JSON. It requires this thing that is not even a power user-friendly thing. So a gentleman by the name of Chris Kent, who's a Microsoft MVP, created a open source PnP-driven SharePoint framework web part called the column formatter. You would find that over at github.com/SharePoint. And then this is where I always get it wrong. I think it's like sp-dev-solutions or something like that. But if you type, if you did a search on Chris Kent column formatter or SharePoint column formatter, you'll find it. And it's a SharePoint framework web part. It is open source. You have all the code. You could put it on a page, and as soon as you put it on a page through a GUI, through a web browser, it will automatically create all the JSON for you, and it will automatically publish it to a list of your choice. It is one of the coolest demos of SharePoint framework I have seen. Even when I say the word demo, you could use it in production code today. You could build like a little administrative site, lock it down to some administrative users, and they can now create column formatters, column formatters for given sites and whatnot using a browser. Just cool stuff.
One of my notes was there's opportunity there for somebody to write that. You just told me somebody already wrote it. So.
Exactly, and it's over on the PnP. It's over on PnP. So SharePoint PnP. Greg Frick, thank you. Yeah, it's github.com/SharePoint/sp-dev-solutions with an S on the end of solutions. Within there, go into the solutions folder, and you're going to find the column formatter. Huge shout out to Chris Kent. He just joined the PnP team, by the way, which I think was one of was an outstanding add for them. They got a really good, solid developer added to their team. That was pretty new. Yeah, so very cool stuff.
Very cool, very cool. And Greg kind of followed up about the lists. He says, do you know if the list improvements allow me to show attached file names in a view?
I was thinking about that. I don't know. I'd have to look up.
A demo, you can grab them in Flow, I know, because they were showing a demo where it would grab attachments and put it into an email and flow it out to somebody, and you click on it and see the attachments. So I would say you could probably do it through the framework without a problem, but I didn't see any out of the box showing of that.
I just don't know.
Our good friend Ravi Chandra says there is a workaround using Power Apps which can show preview, but as of now, it supports only for images.
There you go.
Thank you, Ravi. Appreciate that.
Hey, I saw a question on the stream there about streams, asking if stream is what's used for team video, and the answer actually is yes, it will be.
Oh, cool.
So when you do your meeting in Teams, they're going to store that in Stream once it's available to everybody.
That's cool. Something else about Teams, just randomly think about, like, we're using GoToWebinar here for this, and not that Teams would be good for a webinar. I have been on Teams chats, like when you might have used GoToMeeting before, or you might have used Skype to have a larger meeting with outside people, not just in your org. I have now seen that with Teams, and it did work pretty well. Again, there's still some gaps, but it was nice to see that Teams it's starting to replace the need for having Skype when you want to have a large group communication or something, like when you're talking with vendors and customers and a group of 25 and under or something like that.
Gotcha. All right, great. Well, that is the end of our time. It is just about 12:15. So if there are no other questions, Sydney, I see you're saying the link didn't show up. I will make sure all these links are in our recap. You guys will all get an email with a copy of this video when we post it to YouTube, and then I'll make sure all these links are in that recap as well. But with that said, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. We really appreciate your time. Thank you to our friends over at Kiefer Consulting, Andy Coyle, Peter Allen. It was so fun to hang out with you guys in Vegas. Thank you for coming.
So quick.
I also want to hang out. I do want to hang out with these guys too. But thank you to Brian Wallace and Greg Kiefer as well over at Kiefer Consulting for helping us get this set up and for loaning us your guys. Eric, thank you as well for joining us today. Appreciate that as always. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. If you have any further questions, please feel free to find us on the social media or email us. I know for us, it's pixelmill.com, at pixelmillteam, at Eric Overfield. For me, it's at Michael Scott Wells without the vowels. If you want to have any questions about any other stuff. I know for Kiefer Consulting on Twitter, they are at Kiefer Consult, or I believe it's kieferconsulting.com. Andy or Peter, are you guys on Twitter if people want to come find you, or do you run away screaming when it comes to social media?
Yeah.
There you go. I had a feeling. Well, again, thank you so much for being here, guys. Please check out Kiefer. They're doing great stuff. Again, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for joining our sessions. Next month, we're going to have a session on blockchain featuring our good friend Eric Overfield and our other good friend Christian Buckley. So that'll be a very fun session. With that being said, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your holiday weekend, and we will see you guys around next time. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you all. See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.